This is Nightly Business Report with Tyler Matheson and Sue Herrera.
Next chapter, Verizon buys Yahoo's core internet business for a fraction of what it was once worth, marking the end of an era for one of the internet's pioneers.
Chaotic kickoff from protests to heckling. It was a rocky start to the Democratic Party's national convention, as new polls show the race is tightening.
Precious metal, why the key to the electric car revolution can be found in a remote part of the Nevada desert. All those stories and more tonight on Nightly Business Report for Monday, July 25th.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. It is the end of the line for one of the original internet disruptors and the beginning of a new one for a telecom giant. Yahoo has agreed to sell its core business to Verizon for nearly $5 billion. For Yahoo, it not only ends a drawn-out auction process, but it also caps CEO Marissa Mayer's 4-year turnaround effort, one that many say failed to materialize. For Verizon, it extends the telecom company's digital reach to make it a bigger rival to both Google and Facebook. Shares of both Verizon and Yahoo finished the day lower. Julia Borston has more on the deal and what's likely to happen next.
Telecom giant Verizon is buying Yahoo's core assets. Verizon hoping to combine data from smartphones with AOL and Yahoo's ad systems to improve targeting and create an ad giant to rival Google and Facebook.
We've completely modernized the product line, and we've gone mobile. We've invented new forms of advertising. We've driven towards the programmatic buying, the overall buying push that we see happening from advertisers. And our user base has grown by more than 50%.
Verizon, with its AOL acquisition, and Yahoo own complementary technology tools, and they both bring scale in users and data about them, which enables more accurate targeting of a broader audience.
You've got AOL, which is primarily for Verizon an ad tech platform. You've got Yahoo now, which is primarily a content platform, and you've got Verizon itself, which I think in this context you can think of as customer data about wireless usage. What they're hoping is that if you combine those three things, you can actually significantly enhance the value of Yahoo's advertising inventory.
This deal is all about ad technology, tools for marketers to decide what types of ads to buy and to automatically distribute and target those ads with tools to measure their impact. And this deal is about the ability to use those ad tech tools at scale. Yahoo's web services draw about 1 billion monthly users, while Verizon, the leading U.S. mobile carrier, has 140 million wireless subscribers.
I think between the team at Verizon, the team at AOL, and the team at Yahoo, we will set the business up to compete at a completely different level, than any of our businesses have been able to do alone in the past.
Though these new assets allow Verizon to leapfrog Microsoft, the acquisition would give Yahoo just 5% total digital ad market share, according to eMarketer, a distant third to Google and Facebook. But this deal isn't just about ad tech. Verizon has been investing in its Go90 app to create a mobile video platform. It has a long way to go to rival YouTube and Facebook. We'll see if Verizon can drive traffic from Yahoo's users to create more valuable ad inventory there as well. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Julia Borston in Los Angeles.
On Wall Street, stocks fell from record levels. A decline in oil prices weighed on energy shares as investors looked ahead to a big week of earnings reports and a two-day meeting of Federal Reserve policymakers. The Dow Jones Industrial Average was down nearly 78 points to 18,493. NASDAQ off 2.5. The S&P 500, which closed at a record on Friday, declined 6. As for oil prices, they were down more than 2%, hitting a 3-month low on growing concerns that we talked about last week about a global glut of crude.
To politics now, where the Democratic National Convention is getting underway in Philadelphia. The theme, United Together. After today's rocky start, unity appears a long way off. John Harwood comes to us from the city of brotherly love. John, it's good to see you as always. The head of the DNC, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, resigned yesterday as the party's chairwoman, effective at the end of the convention. Today, she changed her mind about gaveling the convention into session. So walk us through that process and what happened.
Well, what happened, Sue, was some of that disunity that you just alluded to. Debbie Wasserman Schultz went to her home state's delegation, Florida, and was booed. Now, once that was demonstrated, nobody wanted to repeat the booing that occurred on the floor at the Republican convention last week that caused everyone to conclude that they were not unified. Democrats don't want that, but it's going to be a struggle to prevent that from happening again, and that's why Debbie Wasserman Schultz took a step in that direction and turned the gavel over to Stephanie Rawlings Blake, the mayor of Baltimore.
You know, John, I heard some of the restiveness described by one Sanders supporter this way. Bernie fed us a bunch of Mountain Dew, and now he wants us to go to sleep. It ain't happening. Will the Democrats be able to get past all of this restiveness?
Well, we'll find out tonight, because not only do we have Michelle Obama speaking this evening, very popular First Lady, but you've also got Elizabeth Warren, the hero of the populace, and Bernie Sanders himself will back cleanup and speak in the 11 o'clock hour. He has been trying urgently all afternoon through text messages and emails to calm his supporters, ask as a personal favor to him that they not boo Hillary Clinton's the mention of her name, and he's going to mention her name in that speech, so we'll find out tonight.
You know, John, as the Democrats get started, is it possible to measure the effects of the Republican convention last week?
Not with any great reliability, Sue. It's always dangerous to poll in the middle of events or immediately after big events. However, what the measurements that we do have suggest that Donald Trump has gotten a bump from his convention. In fact, in the average of national polls by RealClearPolitics.com, that website, Donald Trump has moved very slightly ahead.
Wow. All right. It's going to be an interesting evening and a fascinating week. John, thank you so much. John Harwood in Philadelphia.
Well, the heat wave in Philadelphia did not keep protesters away. If anything, it just heated them up. The demonstrations at the Democratic National Convention appeared bigger than those at the RNC last week in Cleveland. And today's protests were mostly driven by Senator Bernie Sanders supporters representing a variety of diverse interests. Eamon Javers was in the middle of it all.
A fairly significant pro-Bernie Sanders protest here on Broad Street in Philadelphia. This crowd walking south on Broad Street from City Hall all the way down to the Wells Fargo Center, which is where the Democratic National Convention is actually being held. As you can see from the signs behind me, this group very much for Bernie. Bernie Sanders signs everywhere. No wall or Wall Street corruption signs. Hillary for prison signs. Burn the system down for Bernie Sanders. This group very much opposed to Hillary Clinton. I saw one sign that said, "Indict the Queen," and they're chanting, "Shame on the DNC." So this is going to be a tough week for Democratic Party unity here in Philadelphia. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Eamon Javers in Philly.
The election uncertainty is making some wealthy investors nervous. According to a new survey, nearly half are considering selling some of their stocks when the votes are tallied in November. Robert Frank has the details.
Millionaire investors say this election is the most important in recent history, and many have their finger on the sell button depending on the results. 3/4 of millionaire investors say this election is a, quote, game changer and are nervous about the outcome. That's according to a UBS survey of investors with $1 million or more in investable assets. Millionaire anxiety could lead to large stock sales. Nearly half of the investors plan to reduce their market exposure as a result of the election, and a small percentage have already sold. But their investment plans and fears depend largely on their politics, and millionaires are sharply divided along party lines, with roughly a third Democrat, a third Republican, and a third independent. 61% said if their preferred candidate wins, it will be good for the market, and 2/3 said if the opposing candidate wins, it's bad for the economy.
Their political leanings or political affiliations are directly impacting how they feel about the investment outlook and the prospect for the stock market going forward.
Millionaires say the country is on the wrong track, but they are divided on the solutions. GOP millionaires say the answer is tax cuts, a balanced budget, and strict immigration enforcement. Democrats say the answer is higher taxes on the rich, a higher minimum wage, and clean energy. So rather than a, quote, market reaction to the election, investors will react according to their politics, split sharply along party lines. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Robert Frank.
Politics in the U.S. and abroad dominated the conversation over the weekend at a meeting of the world's major economies. The so-called G20 group said it was focused on a number of global uncertainties and that downside risks persist. Eunice Yoon reports tonight from Beijing.
Over the weekend, G20 finance ministers and central bank governors gathered in the Chinese southwestern city of Chengdu, and the topic was Brexit, Brexit, and more Brexit. There is almost universal concern about the impact of Brexit on European growth and therefore on the global economy. The G20 leaders issued a communique where they said that they would use every tool available to them in order to try to prop up growth, but because this is a G20, there weren't a lot of specifics. Now, what they did agree upon is that they hoped that Brexit would be negotiated quickly and in the least disruptive way. Otherwise, as the IMF's David Lipton told me, there could be a slowdown on investment as well as spending.
What's most important is that there's an amicable approach, that they approach this with a sense of mutual gain and find a way to agree on some new rules without creating a period of unnecessary uncertainty.
Since the meetings followed the Republican National Convention, there was a lot of talk about Donald Trump and his economic policies. There's a big concern among G20 leaders about rising protectionism in the United States as well as elsewhere around the world. One of the targets of Trump's policies is Mexico. I sat down with the Deputy Finance Minister of Mexico and I asked him about the anti-trade rhetoric and whether or not he's concerned it could hurt relations.
What we are working on is to show the positive things that happen with free trade, the integration between our economies, and all these relationships that we have that are more profound than the government relationships.
Another major concern among the G20 leaders is the health of the Italian banks. The European Commission has been negotiating with the Italian government over some sort of rescue plan. I talked with all of the players, the European Commission, the Italian Central Bank governor, as well as the Italian finance minister, and all of them had a similar message, and that is that they believed that the fears among investors were exaggerated and that they were working very closely in order to try to come up with a solution sometime soon. The EU is going to be releasing its bank stress test results on Friday. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Eunice Yoon in Beijing.
Still ahead, when an email from your boss isn't what it seems and could cost your company big money. Surging demand for air travel will increase the need for more pilots. According to a forecast by Boeing, global airlines will need to hire nearly 1.5 million pilots and technicians by the year 2035. The Asia-Pacific region will account for about 40% of total new hires, mostly because of China's growing travel market.
Well, there's not only global demand for air travel, but also for electric vehicles, and that means there's an increased need for lithium, which is one of the key components in batteries for electric vehicles. And that's putting even more attention on a remote part of the American desert. Phil LeBeau reports from Silver Peak, Nevada.
That's not a mirage. Those are lithium extraction ponds outside Silver Peak, Nevada. As the water evaporates, which often takes more than a year, it eventually leaves behind lithium, a primary component in the batteries used for cell phones and electric vehicles. As sales of those cars, like Tesla's Model S and Nissan's Leaf, increase, automakers are clamoring for more lithium.
We've been driving lithium demand up for a long time with electronics, portable electronics, but now it's electric vehicles. The larger batteries that electric vehicles use demand a lot more lithium.
Pure Energy Minerals is hoping to tap the supply of lithium in water tables deep below Nevada's desert. But unlike the current process of having water evaporate over time, Pure Energy wants to build a processing plant to produce more lithium faster.
Instead of taking 18 months or 2 years like large evaporation ponds, this is an industrial process that works in a matter of hours.
For nearby Silver Peak, the push for more lithium could pump new life into an old mining town that is so small it doesn't even have a gas station. But Silver Peak and the lithium deposits in this area are not far from a new battery plant Tesla is building just outside of Reno. And as that plant begins to supply lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles and energy companies, the people in this area could see their fortunes change. Phil LeBeau, Nightly Business Report, Silver Peak, Nevada.
Gilead cuts its outlook for the year, and that's where we begin tonight's market focus. The biotech company topped analysts' profit and revenue expectations in the latest quarter, thanks in part to an increase in sales for its HIV drugs. But the drug maker lowered its overall revenue guidance and also sees product sales slowing. Shares of Gilead initially fell in after hours, but finished the regular session up 2% to $88.55. Profit and sales at Texas Instruments beat Wall Street estimates thanks to strong product demand from the automotive and industrial markets. The chipmaker also said earnings guidance for the quarter was better than expected. Following the news, shares popped in extended hours after ending the regular session up 1% to 66.22. Currency headwinds dragged down sales at Kimberly-Clark. The makers of Kleenex tissues still managed to beat expectations, and the CEO said, quote, "The worst has passed for the company." Kimberly-Clark now expects organic sales for the year to come in at the low end of its previously issued guidance. That sent shares down more than 1% to 132.59. And promotional offers led to more customers for Sprint, helping the wireless carrier post better than expected revenue. But despite the success, with the steep discounting, the company said it will likely raise prices in the not too distant future. The company's CEO said it's all about getting back to basics.
We're going back to the fundamentals of business, and that is bring a great product at a great price. And you started to see customers come in, 173,000 postpaid phone net adds, which is what matters in this business. And it's actually the highest in the last 9 years. So we're happy with the results and the progress that we're making.
Shares of Sprint spiked 27% to $5.90.
The telecom equipment maker Ericsson said its CEO Hans Vestberg has stepped down. The news comes after the company's board of directors unanimously voted to replace him, saying the time is right for a new leader. The company's current CFO will take over until a replacement is found. Shares up 8 cents to $7.44. LVMH will sell its Donna Karan brand to G3 Apparel for $650 million. Under the deal, G3 will also get the DKNY clothing line. Shares of G3, though, fell on the news, off 14% to $42.95. AMC Entertainment sweetened its offer and is buying rival Carmike Cinemas for $1.2 billion. The merger creates the nation's largest theater chain. Shares of AMC fell 2% to $29.92. Shares of Carmike down 44 cents at $30.69. Outer Wall, which owns the DVD rental business Redbox, will be taken private by the private equity firm Apollo Global Management for more than $1.5 billion. The deal expected to be finalized in the third quarter of this year. Outer Wall shares up 11% on the session to $52.19.
When the big boss says jump, many employees ask how high. And that's exactly why a new email scam known as CEO fraud is so effective at fooling its victims. It counts on you doing exactly what your boss tells you to do. And the FBI says it's on the rise. Andrea Day talks to one CEO who became a target.
The perfect storm for this type of fraud to happen.
It's called business email compromise, or CEO fraud, and the con is simple. Swindlers fake an email from top managers at a company requesting a wire transfer. And if all goes as planned, the money winds up in the criminal's bank account, according to the FBI, netting billions and counting. The agency reporting a 270% increase in just the first 4 months of the year. And something Tom Kemp says he's lucky to have caught just in time.
So I came into the office one day and someone said, "Hey, we're working on that wire transfer you requested." And I gave them a funny look. I'm like, "What are you talking about? I didn't request a wire transfer."
He says it was an email chain, supposedly from him to the CFO, then forwarded to accounting, asking for more than $357,000 to be transferred immediately.
It just looked like a normal business communication. Then we stared at the email, and then we noticed that the I and the F were flipped around.
The swindlers had created a domain to look almost like Centrify's, researched the company to find out who was in charge and who could initiate a transfer, then set up email accounts in their names.
It was completely crazy in terms of just the level of sophistication.
And he says even after they discovered the scheme, the emails kept coming in.
The crook was actually communicating with us in real time, trying to nudge us along to actually initiate the wire transfer.
The CEOs of Snapchat and Seagate were once targeted. But in those cases, the phony email was sent to HR, requesting W-2s for all employees, not a wire transfer. In Kemp's case, he says he tried to track down the criminals behind it, calling the company Vistaprint, where the domain was registered.
And they admitted that morning that 60 other lookalike domains were created. These domain registration companies, they really don't require any information or any credit card information to set up a domain, at least for the first 30 days.
Vistaprint tells us, quote, each domain registration goes through various fraud and credit card checks to ensure payment is verified. The email address being used is also run through a variety of proprietary checks to flag potential fraud. This is unfortunately an issue that all domain providers face, and every single complaint about the misuse of a domain is investigated.
You really need to step up your game in terms of making sure that you don't have this occur to yourself and your companies.
And he says the best way to make sure is to educate your accounting and HR departments about the fraud and make certain they know that if something looks slightly off, just pick up the phone and call, even if it's calling the CEO. I'm Andrea Day for Nightly Business Report.
Coming up, growing appetite. Fewer people have been heading to the mall, but there may be one thing that's starting to pull them back in.
Here's a look at what to watch for tomorrow. Apple, 3M, McDonald's, and Caterpillar are just a few of the Dow components that will release their quarterly results. The Federal Reserve kicks off its two-day policy meeting, and we'll learn if the pace of newly built homes picked up in June. And that's what to watch for on Tuesday. A new study shows the highest paid CEOs run some of the worst performing companies. That's according to analysis from the corporate governance research firm MSCI. If you invested $100 in the companies with the highest paid CEOs, that investment would have grown to $265 over 10 years. But if you invested the same amount in companies with the lowest paid CEOs, you would have $367. The results call into question whether equity incentive awards for chief executives help drive better results for shareholders. Twitter is striking some new live streaming deals. The social media company will host live Major League Baseball and National Hockey League games. Twitter says the package will include one out-of-market game once a week. It's not known how the games will be selected. Twitter is making a big push into sports. The company now has deals with 4 major sports leagues and the Pac-12 network for college sports. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, restaurant sales overtook grocery store sales last year. That change now showing up in retail real estate. So forget the traditional food court. Retail landlords are betting on a new way to drive traffic to the malls. Diana Olick explains.
On a sultry summer afternoon in Northwest D.C., workers are lining up for lunch at the food trucks. Trucks offering new fare in a new fashion, but parked right in front of old-fashioned shopping malls.
Food trucks are basically the pop-ups of the restaurant business, right? They come in, they can set up, low cost, and they're constantly changing.
Trucks don't traditionally benefit the retail landlord because they're setting up outside. But some landlords are starting to incorporate the food trucks into traditional retail spaces, creating outdoor food courts.
I think for urban locations, it's probably a good idea because
It definitely is going to introduce more foot traffic to the fronts of the malls.
It's all part of a shift in how landlords use food to drive traffic. This includes so-called grocerants, which are a hybrid supermarket with a wide variety of prepared foods and an eating area, like you're seeing now at Whole Foods. Then there are food halls in the mall, much more diverse than the old fast food courts, and celebrity chef restaurants. But most we spoke to said the name wasn't all that important.
If it was like an incredibly high-profile celebrity chef like Gordon Ramsay, for me, it's not about the person as much as the food.
While the strong credit of a cheesecake factory is a sure thing for landlords, they're also betting on new concepts in a new way.
What we're seeing is a move away from a traditional tenant-landlord partnership and more towards a financial partnership, where sometimes landlords are seeing these new restaurant concepts as business opportunities for themselves.
So while e-commerce may be driving consumers away from shopping centers, food is pulling them back in. And landlords are willing to cater to just about any taste in order to keep consumers hungry. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Diana Olick in Washington.
To read more about how food is ruling retail real estate, head to our website, nbr.com.
Before we go, here's another look at how the day fared on Wall Street, a day that saw oil prices fall more than 2% to a 3-month low. The Dow was down nearly 78 points, but that's well off of its worst levels of the day. The Nasdaq was off 2.5, and the S&P 500, which closed at a record on Friday, declined 6 points. And that'll do it for us on Nightly Business Report. I'm Sue Herrera. Thanks for joining us.
And thanks from me as well. I'm Tyler Mathis, and have a great evening, everybody, and we'll see you back here tomorrow night.